Bad news for dollar holders everywhere. U.S. inflation jumped to a new high, 8.5% in March. Of course, yesterday we saw that the Biden administration was sort of prepping everybody for this number. And I think a lot of people thought it might be over 10%, but clocks in at 8.5%. It's the highest in 4 decades. So last time inflation was as high was 1981. Core inflation jumped about 0.5%, 0.05% rather. So that is up as well. I think according to some analysts, it's not quite as high as they expected, but it's still up there. Core inflation takes out some things like food prices, like seasonal food prices, and it just looks at like core things like energy. So across the board, we're seeing higher prices on everything. Like your dollar is worth less than it used to be in the past. For Bitcoiners, what we care about is how does Bitcoin react to this news? Basically flat. Bitcoin has been trading around 40,000 here for a little bit, up and down, down the stairs a little bit, then back up again. Doesn't really seem like the narrative is really like there together. That Bitcoin's price isn't going up with this inflation headline. And this has been going on for months now, right? Like we've been seeing higher inflation numbers month over month for quite a few months. Bitcoin doesn't seem to care. Maybe at some point it'll start to care. Zach, I'll throw it up to you and get your take on this.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, this high inflation is here to stay and it becomes a real pain. It's not going anywhere, right? We eliminated the word transitory from the lexicon not long ago. I think there's a couple angles here, right? I think we're seeing Bitcoin correlate with the Nasdaq to the tightest correlation we've ever seen on that front. So Bitcoin is increasingly trading like some other asset, some other securities, especially in the tech realm, right? It's a similar approach that professional traders are viewing Bitcoin as. So that is partially to blame for some of the flat Bitcoin action. The other thing I want to mention is that, there are people who are tracking inflation who say that this 8.5 figure may be on the low end, right? We did a story not long ago about a censorship-resistant inflation index being built over on Chainlink, looking at a bit of different data rather than the consumer price index. And based on that, it was something like 13.3% inflation rate. So there are some out there who are especially attuned to this in the crypto world who are looking at different ways to measure this. And by those measurements, inflation may be even worse than we're hearing from the government here at this point in time. So a lot of always interesting conversations around inflation. Definitely remains a topic of fascination for a lot of people in the crypto space for a variety of reasons. But yeah, sometimes this Bitcoin as an inflation hedge narrative doesn't really seem to be getting a lot of love. Well, it doesn't seem to be influencing the price very much relative to some of the other factors in the market. Jen, I saw your hand. Go.
I saw David's go up first, so I'm going to knock it up to you, David, and I'll take it afterwards. I know. Just being the nice Canadian I am, I got to let David take his turn.
Yeah, so 2 things, I guess. One is like on the inflation hedge thing, there's been some sort of intellectual slippage, I guess I would say, in the Bitcoin discourse. The idea that Bitcoin is an inflation hedge is a theory that is sort of future forward and has always been. The idea is that eventually there will be enough Bitcoin adoption that it's spread all around the world and it's not influenced by changes to the supply of any single national currency. We're not there yet, even according to the people who believe that this could eventually happen. The U.S. dollar has the most influence over Bitcoin price, and so the inflation decoupling has not happened yet. And people who are saying Bitcoin is an inflation hedge, don't trust those people. They're out over their skis. The second point that I wanted to make is, this is a bad number. However, it's worth pointing out that half of this inflation is due to changes in gasoline prices, according to Reuters. And as we know, it's not a complete correlation, but there are some disruptions in the fossil fuel markets right now because of the war in Ukraine, and so that's worth keeping in mind. And some people do see, obviously, this could stick around for a little while, but there have been some comments to the effect that this looks like a peak in U.S. inflation. That doesn't mean it's going to go to zero, but it might not go much higher from here. And also worth pointing out, we actually came up short of Wall Street projections on this number by about 1/10 to 1/5 of a percentage point, and that was enough to give us a little bump in the Dow Jones today because we came in under what some projections were. That's just the weird counterintuitive way markets work sometimes. It's a bad number, but it's not as bad as we thought, so we're going to celebrate. Okay, now, Jen, you're on the stack next.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, it feels like every time we talk about inflation, we're saying we've hit a new 4-decade high. I think we've said that several times over the past few months. It, like Will said, it's the highest it's been since 1981. And every time we talk about inflation, I say this, but I have to say it again. I talk about those human stories, right? Food, housing, cars, energy, consumer products, all of these prices are the highest they've been in some of our lifetimes, and that is very sad. And so I think that when we talk about, Bitcoin possibly being an inflation hedge and Bitcoin possibly being something that could future proof us if we achieve that mainstream adoption, it's headlines like this that make me hope that even though Bitcoin isn't reacting to the news and the price isn't going up, it encourages people to learn about other ways to store their money that are not the US dollar. And so I hope that people are seeing these headlines and hearing these utterances in the news about Bitcoin possibly being an inflation hedge and are taking the chance to learn about Bitcoin and other ways to store their money to protect themselves against what we're seeing. Will, I think I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I need to fact check myself really quickly. So core inflation excludes food, like seasonal volatility from food, and energy, and it was up 0.3% over the prior month. So difference than what I was saying there earlier. It's important to track that metric as well because it takes into account things that a lot of people are using day to day. The second thing I want to riff on is just what David was saying that's going about the idea like Bitcoin being this sort of inflation hedge for the future, like this idea that Bitcoin at some point will get there. I think that is important, but another thing to look at that's really important here is that Bitcoin's price is still over 30K. Like the meme used to be Bitcoin, this is the last time Bitcoin's over 10K. That was just a few years ago. Whenever Bitcoin broke over 10K, there was always so much excitement. A lot of people would tweet about it. And then, of course, a few days later, it tumbled back down. And everyone would say, like, oh, we're wrecked. We're all bears. Like, this is all going to zero. Bitcoin's been over 30K for quite a while now. The last time it dipped below was in July of last year, and only dipped below it for like a few days at most. It might have even only been one evening. The fact that Bitcoin's price has been so high, consistently over $30,000, that's a ton of wealth in this ecosystem. And that number, I think, is what matters, like that 200-day moving average of where Bitcoin's price is at. That speaks to me more than saying like, oh, wait, we have another all-time high. I don't think we're just going to get an all-time high because inflation numbers are up. What I'm looking at is saying this 200-day moving average is still going pretty steady. We're not dropping down, and the inflation is already hitting.